Who else is in the house? Who else is in here?
My stepson is in here.
She might be acting like she allegedly cares in the slightest about her stepson in this body cam video. But this woman is accused of a crime that not even veteran law enforcement can comprehend.
33 years of law enforcement. This is the worst treatment of humanity that I've ever witnessed.
She allegedly kept her stepson trapped inside this home for 20 years. When rescued, he weighed just under 70 pounds and was 32 years old. Now she is under arrest, and there are major questions about the failures that would allow this to happen. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. It is hard to come to grips with what police say happened inside this home. You see this picture here. This is in Waterbury, Connecticut. Firefighters responded to a call here for a fire on February 17th. Inside that house, they found much more than just flames and smoke. They say they found a terrifying story of abuse and neglect, and they say this woman is allegedly responsible. This is Kimberly Sullivan. Here she is in custody. Police say that she held her stepson captive for 2 decades inside that home. Police say the man was kept in his room for 22 to 24 hours a day. Before I get into any more of the disturbing details of what allegedly happened in this home, let me lay out the timeline of the night that authorities responded to this fire. Let's begin with the 911 call that we just received.
Oh my God. 911, it's 2 Blake Street.
What's the address?
Please hurry. It's 2 Blake Street. There's a fire.
Okay.
Oh my God. There's a fire. I'm trying to...
Ma'am, what's
2 Blake Street. The TV, I don't know. My son, a stepson is in his room, and I don't know. He did something with the TV. I was sleeping. I fell asleep.
See flames or smoke?
Yes, come on, Steph, come on.
Okay, can you get...
Yes, we need an ambulance, please.
Okay.
Please, we need an ambulance.
Ma'am, all right, you said something's on fire and now you need an ambulance. What's going on there?
Yes, his room, the TV in his room.
Did he get injured? Is he on fire?
Yes, he's injured. Please, send the ambulance.
Ma'am, I'm going to send the ambulance. I need to know what's going on and why they're going out there. Where is he injured?
I don't know. He's kind of, I don't know. He's kind of passed out. He's out of it. Please.
Okay, what's your phone number just in case we need to give you a call back?
Please.
Okay, is the fire out, ma'am?
No, it's not. Please. I'm trying to.
I understand, ma'am. I'm trying to get information on what's going on there.
Oh my God, it's like all the power in the house is out. I don't know if it blew a fuse.
Okay, ma'am, just get out of the house, okay?
Yes, I'm going to call my daughter.
All right.
Oh my God.
Here's the newly released body cam video of what authorities found when they arrived.
Come over here. Go down the road. Come on. Come down. Come down.
Come on, down.
Who else is in the house? Who else is in here?
My stepson is in here.
How many other
help
people?
him out.
Listen,
That's it. I have 2 cats.
Everybody's out?
Yes.
But your stepson's still inside?
Yeah, he's right here.
Okay,
yes.
come out. Come down the road. Come on, come on. It's not safe to stay here. Come on.
All right, here he is. All right, my dog is shaking.
I know. Come down here. That's true. 87 code 3 victim. Fire victim.
Okay.
Come on.
My
87's
dog
right here.
is...
Come on.
my dog.
I know. Come on.
I'm coming.
You're seeing it. Got one victim right here. I need to stay over here.
What you just saw there at the end of the video was the victim, the stepson, being taken to the hospital. According to the arrest warrant affidavit, a Waterbury police officer described the stepson, known as male victim 1, or as we will call him MV1, as emaciated. His hair matted and unkempt, was very dirty, and his teeth all appear to be rotten. Days later, in the hospital, MV1 would speak with police officers and give details of what he says life was like over the last 20 years. Before I go into the details of that, here's what the Waterbury police chief said about what you're about to hear. This video is from the news conference courtesy of WVIT TV in Connecticut.
Because frankly, what was being reported was unfathomable to us at that point in time. Through those investigative meetings and through search warrants, we were able to seize physical evidence and conduct interviews and dig up some more information that corroborated the victim's story.
This is the Law and Crime Legal Alert. Did you know that children are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? And research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to these outcomes. Our partners at Morgan & Morgan are stepping in to fight to hold food companies accountable. They have decades of experience of standing up to big corporations, and they are ready to stand up and fight for families and make sure that they get justice. So if your child under 21 has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or fatty liver disease, visit forthepeople.com/food, or you can scan the QR code on your screen to learn more. According to the affidavit, the male victim told police he was pulled out of public school in 2004 when he would have been around 12 years old. When asked about his earliest memories, MV1 said he would sneak out of his room at night to eat and drink, and when it was discovered that he was doing that, he was locked in his room. He recalled drinking from a toilet because he was only getting 2 cups of water a day. MV1 detailed a life being allegedly held captive in this home by Kimberly Sullivan, who allegedly locked him in his room and would only let him out to do chores. Anytime he would be let out and be around someone, he wouldn't speak about what his life was like inside the home out of fear of being locked down even longer. Police say MV1's dad lived in the house until he died in January 2024 and he was confined to a wheelchair. Then MV1's captivity got allegedly more restrictive. MV1 said that he would have to go to the bathroom in a bottle and on newspaper. There are so many horrifying details in the arrest affidavit that we read through. But this part in particular stood out to me when you try to comprehend what this man says his life was like for 2 decades. MV1 says that he was occasionally allowed to watch TV on the weekends. And once he had a black and white TV in his room, but then that stopped working. He said he would listen to University of Connecticut basketball and NASCAR on the radio near his door to be able to keep track of what year it was. He said he wasn't allowed to have friends, and the only time he was ever allowed to have fun was Halloween. The last time he was allowed to go trick-or-treating, according to CNN, was when he was 12 years old, and his last costume was a firefighter. And that leads us to the fire that allegedly set him free. MV1 says he set the flames himself. He says that he used a lighter that he had taken from his now deceased father a year prior. And he used printer paper and hand sanitizer. He told police that he read that hand sanitizer was flammable. MV1 allegedly told Sullivan the fire started because his radio malfunctioned, and then she let him out of his room. But she also demanded that he wash his face before he escaped out of fear that firefighters might notice his appearance. Then the final line of that paragraph hit me in the chest when I read it. It states that MV1 said he laid on the floor with the fire in the house as smoke was going through the home, knowing that firefighters would be forced to get him, believing it was the only way out of his situation. Then he was taken to the hospital where he is now recovering and then had the conversation with police. According to the affidavit, MV1 stood at 5 foot 9 inches tall and weighed 68.9 pounds. He told detectives that he started the fire because, quote, I wanted my freedom. He did suffer smoke inhalation during the fire. He's considered to be in stable condition and is recovering at the hospital. While he's recovering, there are certainly a lot of questions about how this was allegedly able to happen and for so long. Waterbury police say the Department of Children and Families made 2 trips to MV1's house in 2004 after he was pulled out of school because there were concerns from the children and teachers at the school that something was going on. The Waterbury police chief said this about those visits in that news conference, this video from WVIT.
We're doing some background investigation. There are 2 incidents that we had within our computer system of dealing with that address and interaction with the family back in 2005. One was a request from DCF to do a welfare check at the location because children that the victim was familiar with hadn't seen him and they were concerned about him. Officers went to the house. The house was clean. It was lived in. They spoke to the victim at that point in time, and there were no cause for any alarm or any conditions that existed that would have led officers to believe anything other than a normal childhood and a normal family existence was occurring. That was reported back to DCF, and that was the last that we were involved in that particular investigation. We were called back to the house in the latter part of April by the family who wanted to file a harassment complaint against members of the school district, saying that they were continuously reporting them to DCF and felt that they were trying to get the family in trouble and have the family investigated. We have no further information about where that went other than there was no proof provided by the family that there was any type of harassment that was occurring. As far as the school district's concerned, we are looking at those records now. We're working with DCF to look at records that they may have from previous investigations, and that's part of the ongoing investigation.
DCF told WTNH in Connecticut that they have no records related to MV1 and his family. They said that in that state, records are expunged 5 years after reports of neglect or abuse are considered unsubstantiated. Now, you may also be wondering, what about other members of this family, about other people who are related to MV1? The New York Post spoke to the man's biological mom. The woman lives in Meriden, Connecticut, which is about 20 minutes from Waterbury, where her son was allegedly being held captive. She told the Post from outside her house, quote, "We are all trying to come to grips with this horror that my son had to endure," and, quote, "He has family who love him so much and has never been forgotten about." The Post says the woman would not answer questions about why she didn't allegedly rescue her son from this abuse. As for the stepmom, here's Kimberly Sullivan appearing in court. She is now charged with assault in the first degree, kidnapping in the second degree, unlawful restraint in the first degree, cruelty to persons, and reckless endangerment in the first degree. Here is what her attorney said outside of court, this per CT Insider.
Absolutely. Yeah, so she completely maintains her innocence. From our perspective, these allegations are not true. They are outlandish. I mean, she was blown away when she heard these allegations. She's adamant they are not true. This did not happen, and we look forward to being able to vindicate her and show that she's done nothing wrong.
Can you speak on, I guess, what your stance is, what she, I guess you say she's innocent, can you just kind of expand on that?
She's never locked him in a room. That is absolutely not true. He was not locked in a room. She did not restrain him in any way. She provided food. She provided shelter. She is blown away by these allegations. It is shocking, and what's more shocking to me is how someone can be falsely accused of such a thing.
And you mentioned her husband passing away recently.
Correct.
Potentially someone who was
the biological father. Well, I mean, he was the biological father. He's the one that dictated how his son would be raised. We think as the evidence comes out, you will see that she's not the villain she's being made out to be. Absolutely not.
You mentioned that the allegations were being corroborated. I mean, how are the allegations really being corroborated?
Well, the allegations seem to be based on the words of one individual and one individual alone. I did not see anything in the warrant to indicate any independent evidence to corroborate these allegations. So we'll see how they stand up at trial. I do anticipate a trial in this case, given the shocking nature of the allegations. She's adamant. She's done nothing wrong.
Where's the boy now? Where's the
I don't know. But my understanding, he's based on my review of the warrant. There was no other person to corroborate any of the claims that were made, and we'll, at the appropriate time, we'll get into the motivations and the credibility of any witness.
Sullivan was held on $300,000 bail, and she was able to post that. So she is free right now as this case continues, and her stepson recovers in the hospital. Her next court date is reportedly March 26th. The city of Waterbury and the community are now trying to help this stepson as he recovers in the hospital and faces a long path ahead when it comes to recovering from what allegedly took place. This is a GoFundMe page that the police department linked to on its Facebook page. It's being run by a nonprofit called Safe Haven of Greater Waterbury, and at the time of this recording, it has raised more than $90,000. Talk more now about a really difficult story is Marian Bracha, practice professor of law at Temple University and a former prosecutor. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know you in your career, you've worked some really difficult cases. What reaction did you have when you first learned about what police say happened inside this home for 20 years?
Well, first reaction is it sounds like a house of horrors. It sounds like something out of a horror film. It sounds like something out of a Stephen King novel. It's almost something that doesn't seem real. But then when you hear the physical condition that the survivor was in, that the male victim was in, you know that it is all too real, and there is actually physical evidence of what he endured for all that time.
How common are, I know this, and we've heard from law enforcement that have said, the chief said in 33 years of his career, he's never seen something like this. But when you have cases where there is someone who's being held captive in a home, how common are these types of cases?
I can't say that a case like this comes down the pike every day. I can't say that this is a very common fact pattern that presents itself to prosecutors for consideration. There have been instances where I've seen and reviewed materials for captive-like cases like this in the past, but again, they're few and far between. And the thing to remember with any case involving a dependent person or with a vulnerable victim is that these crimes go on behind closed doors, in the dark, outside of public viewing. These are not what we call quote unquote street crimes that can be captured by surveillance or poll cameras or a police car that's driving by that happens upon a crime scene. These are things that happen really in the dark and are not often discovered by investigators or by the people who are best suited to help.
Police say that he was pulled out of school, public school, in 2004. And then he was, I guess, considered to be homeschooled at the time, and he just fell through the cracks along the way. How can we track somebody who is pulled out of school, but then it appears that there's no record whatsoever? I know DCF went to the house twice and then said that at the time nothing seemed to be wrong, but how does someone fall through the cracks like this?
I think the only phrase to use there is administrative failure. Children, and especially dependent children, children who are being homeschooled, children who are suspected of enduring abuse should not be able to fall through the cracks or have their cases closed by a cursory review. How does that happen? It happens with overburdened systems. It happens with overworked social workers and caseworkers. It happens when, quite frankly, there isn't the systemic priority placed on safeguarding the most vulnerable and potentially vulnerable victims of crimes and neglect like this.
Then reportedly in Connecticut, after 5 years, when there's a report of abuse, so in this case, a DCF social worker went to the house, found nothing in their mind at that point warranted any sort of charge or abuse, so it was considered unfounded. In Connecticut, those records are expunged after 5 years, so they don't exist anymore. How common are those laws, and what's the point of those laws?
I think laws and timeframes like that, time limits like that on archiving and on record keeping of certain reports is actually pretty common. And if you think about it, it's not just record keeping when it comes to social services, record keeping when it comes to child and youth protective services. Those time limits exist in almost every industry, in almost every facet of our society. Even things like bank records or tax records, things like that are pretty very regularly expunged after a certain number of prescribed years. So unfortunately, I don't think this was any malfeasance. I don't think this was any wrongdoing. This sounds like something that was in line with the agency's policies regarding record keeping and the length of time that records are kept. But this is a fairly common practice, again, not just in the social service realm, but in most facets of our society.
Is there a reason why, though, in this realm that they would do that? I think back in the day, you only have so much room for so much paper, in an archive room, and then now everything's digital. What's the reason that it would be expunged? Is it protecting someone who maybe was accused in a wrong way, and then they don't want to have that on their record if it was something that wasn't true? In this case, we'll see how the court case plays out.
Yeah, I think both of those considerations are at play when it comes to expunging these records. I think you're right that back in the day when these were paper records, there was physical limitation on storage of however many boxes or folders of information that a particular building or storage unit could hold. The same is somewhat true of our digital archives. There are only so many terabytes that exist in terms of our cloud storage or in terms of these agencies' storage. That's not making an excuse for it by any means, but that there is still that consideration of the storage space available for a forever maintenance of records. But I think you're also right that when someone is investigated or when someone is suspected of wrongdoing and they are cleared, there is a societal interest in clearing that person's name if there are no subsequent reports, if there are no follow-up concerns with that person's behavior or that person's care of a child or a dependent person. And so there is a privacy interest there in terms of clearing their name and not having records attributable to them for suspected wrongdoing ad infinitum, forever and always.
So if you were a prosecutor on this case going forward, what happens now? Because you have this, certainly the story that male victim one, told authorities. I mean, there's just so many details of it that are just horrific. He himself is a piece of evidence just with the condition that he was in at the time. What are some of the pieces of evidence you would need as a prosecutor if you were to take this to trial?
So I think there are a few steps of the investigation that I'm sure that are underway and being considered as they proceed toward a prosecution. Number one, the personhood of male victim one has been deprived or jeopardized for all of these years. And so my number one priority as a prosecutor would be to safeguard that personhood, that autonomy, that decision-making and the respect and the dignity that is owed to this victim, to make sure that he is participating meaningfully and willingly in the prosecution without having choices that are foisted upon him that aren't of his making. So I would make sure that he is really involved in the process and that his voice, his preferences, his needs are really heard and attended to moving forward, because obviously he's been through 20 years of having those needs and that voice completely disregarded. So he would be my central focus. There is, of course, the need to gather physical evidence. So I believe his physical condition, his physical state, as you mentioned, is an important piece of evidence. So documenting, photographing, recording how he is physically, his size, his weight, his physical and mental well-being currently after he was discovered after all of these years. And there's also physical documentation of the living conditions where he was for all of those years. The fact that there was plywood and a series of locks on his door. The fact that no one had seen him in however many years. I would be going about the business of finding family members and interviewing them, asking them about their involvement with the family, with the defendant in this case, the caregiver or the should have been caregiver, to find out when the family member's access was restricted to this male victim, when the last time they saw him and what the circumstances of that, of seeing him were. So I'd really be trying to get a holistic view of this person's experiences and living situation, or I should say surviving situation over the past 20 years. And you piece that together with physical evidence, with documentary evidence, with with photographic evidence and certainly with narrative evidence of those closest to him or purportedly close to him or close to the family.
I look at her defense, and her attorney was pretty defiant outside of court, saying that she is completely innocent and we're going to prove this wrong. A lot of things that you would expect a defense attorney to say, especially early on in the case. I think one argument that she is going to make is that he could have left at any time. He didn't talk in the case about any sexual abuse. He said there was one instance of physical abuse. I think it was slapped years ago. He says that had happened. But other than that, it wasn't a physical abuse case, at least according to the arrest affidavit. He was allowed to go outside to do chores. And I think you could see the defense make an argument of, well, he could have left and seeked help at any time if it was really that bad. As the prosecution, how do you push back on that if that's the way the defense wants to do?
So the pushback that I would seek as a prosecutor is to really focus on the psychological harm, which is not just something that exists in one's mind, as it were. It's not just something illusory or imagined. There are psychological and emotional factors that go into holding someone captive, that go into the kidnapping charge, which I think a lot of people hear kidnapping and they say, well, was he taken from one location to the next?
Right.
Was he taken across state lines? But there is a definition of kidnapping, which means to hold against one's will, to hold essentially captive for the purpose of exposing that person to serious bodily injury. And so the serious bodily injury in this case would have been the deprivation of food and water, the deprivation of medical services. That is the exposure to the serious bodily injury in this case. And so the pushback would be, sure, he was allowed outside to take the dog out or to attend to chores for a few minutes a day. But what about the psychological trauma that had gone on for decades before and for all of those decades ongoing that communicated to this male victim one, if I leave or if I try to leave, is there a greater harm that will come to me than submitting or succumbing to this captivity? And so that is really something that needs to be explored and explained to the jury, that holding this male victim captive for all of these years and the conditions that he was kept in really deprived him of the ability to make that choice, the ability to say, well, I'm just going to walk away from this, because in a victim's mind like this, that choice just doesn't exist.
I imagine too for the defense, and I don't envy the job of a defense attorney in this case, because it's there's such you're pushing back on a story that is just, it's so horrific. And I imagine if this arrest affidavit was put up in court where they're talking about how he listened to UConn basketball games so he was able to understand what year it was, that would be really effective to a jury. How else do you see the defense potentially pushing back on the horrific allegations that are being made against their client?
Well, unfortunately, aside from the condition, the physical condition of the victim, so the fact that he was in his 30s and weighed only 70 pounds, and the fact of his living situation, the fact that there was the plywood across the door and the locks on the door, I could imagine a defense putting forward a story or a version that perhaps the danger was coming from the victim, and that these steps, these lockdown conditions that were put in place to keep him in captivity were actually put in place as a safety mechanism or a defense mechanism by the defendant. So I would anticipate the defense to explore and perhaps do some finger pointing to the victim and to say that this is not someone who was safe. This is not someone who was physically or mentally reliable, and someone whom perhaps the defendant feared. And so she was acting out of self-preservation. I don't know if that would carry the day with a jury, but I could imagine a world where that is a potential defense.
Yeah, it's again, it's a tough job. I think in that case, for everyone's innocent until proven guilty, but for defense attorneys in this case, she was given $300,000 bond. She was able to post that. What do you make of that part of this story?
In most jurisdictions where charges have no available bail, ordinarily that charge would be homicide. So in most jurisdictions, in most states, most criminal offenses do have a bail amount that is available to a charge. Remember that bail is not intended to be a punishment. Bail is intended to secure a defendant's presence and participation in the criminal case, in the prosecution. So if there is no indication that this person is a flight risk, if there's no indication that this person has previously left town or gone on the lam, the fact that she has private counsel is also something that is taken into consideration. She has already invested in her defense, so she is putting out evidence or an indication that she intends to fight this case, which also makes it more likely that she will appear in court. So the availability of bail is not a surprise to me because there is fortunately no homicide charge here. But at the same time, there would be conditions attached to her bail, things like a stay away order. She will likely be ordered to have no contact with the male victim. She will certainly be instructed that she's not to have any contact or attempt any contact with other prosecution witnesses if there are family members who are sought to be interviewed or testify on behalf of male victim one. So there will be conditions attendant with that bail, but it's not a surprise to me that bail was set and that she was able to post her percentage of it.
And then just lastly, as we look at this story, and so often you hear about the missed red flags that were there. And in this case, you had DCF that in 2004, we don't know what the condition of the home was in 2004, but apparently it wasn't reaching the level that they needed to do something, though people were concerned about it. When you look at the system as a whole, what can be done just from your career and your experience, what can be done to prevent these cases where these red flags are missed from happening?
Well, my number one question would be, after 2004, when this person was still 11 years old and was ostensibly being homeschooled until the age that they could have declared emancipation or declared independence and left the situation of formal education, where was the state? Where was the oversight? Where was anyone making sure that homeschooling was actually being done, that he was being cared for, and that he was in a safe and if not loving, at least educational environment? I think if there had been some oversight in terms of what condition his homeschooling or his alleged homeschooling situation was, there could have been more eyes on his condition, and perhaps the sad state that he was surviving in would have come to light much, much sooner.
Yeah, it's a horrific story, and there's going to be a lot of questions that will continue on as this case and investigation continues as well. Marian Bradshaw, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chris.
We'll continue to follow this story as new details become available. For On the Case, presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.